Happy Monday, everybody. This is Dave with a quick reminder that if you haven't already, please be sure to listen to our Hacking Humans podcast. That's where myself and Joe Kerrigan from the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute look behind the social engineering scams, phishing schemes, and criminal exploits that are making headlines and taking a heavy toll on organizations around the world. You can stay up to date by following the Hacking Humans social pages on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And you can also find it on our website, CyberWire.com. It's Hacking Humans. We hope you'll check it out. Thanks. Muddy Water shows renewed activity. No 0 days and no exotic malware, just clever approaches and determined social engineering. Spam is serving up payloads that exploit an old Microsoft Office vulnerability. Russian-sponsored disinformation has been romping freely through YouTube. Some back and forth over Huawei. Washington isn't relenting, but some relief for U.S. companies may be forthcoming. And United Technologies has agreed to acquire Raytheon. Now a moment to tell you about our sponsor, Observit. The greatest threat to businesses today isn't the outsider trying to get in. It's the people you trust, the ones who already have the keys. Your employees, contractors, and privileged users. According to a recent CA Technologies research report, 53% of organizations confirmed insider attacks within the last 12 months. Can you afford to ignore this real and growing threat? With Observit, you don't have to. See, most security tools only analyze computer, network, or system data. But to stop insider threats, you need to track a combination of user and data activity. Observit combats insider threats by enabling your security team to detect risky activity, investigate in minutes, effectively respond, and stop data loss. Want to see it in action for yourself? Try Observit free, no installation required, at observit.com/cyberwire. That's observit.com/cyberwire. And we thank Observit for sponsoring our show. Funding for this CyberWire podcast is made possible in part by ExtraHop, providing cyber analytics for the hybrid enterprise. Learn more about how ExtraHop Reveal X enables network threat detection and response at extrahop.com. From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Monday, June 10th, 2019. Trend Micro, which increasingly seems to be playing Captain Ahab to Tehran's white whale, but in a good way, has more on the Muddy Water actor. There's been a resurgence in activity by the threat campaign. The latest round of phishing targets appear to have been in the Turkish government and Jordanian universities. The approach in these cases involved the use of compromised credentials, as opposed to the spoofed identities noticed in earlier rounds. There are new technical developments in Muddy Water's activity, a new PowerShell-based multi-stage backdoor, PowerStats version 3, and some new post-exploitation tools, for example. But Trend Micro, in their closing summary, points out that Muddy Water seems to have access to neither 0 days nor advanced malware, yet it manages to compromise its targets and get the job done without needing either. If 0 days are your bugaboo, don't overlook the threat that shifting and clever scheming can present. Muddy Water doesn't. Microsoft warned late Friday that a wave of spam is carrying malicious RTF files that exploit CVE 2017-11882, a vulnerability in an older version of Microsoft Office's equation editor. That this is worrisome news shows that many users continue to be laggards with respect to patching. The vulnerability in question was fixed back in 2017. All you need to do to be safe is make sure your software is up to date. Speaking of patches, tomorrow is Patch Tuesday, and the industry expects the customary round of fixes from Microsoft and Adobe. Stay tuned. Russian-operated YouTube channels are freely spreading tabloid-esque disinformation that successfully evades YouTube's content moderation. NTV and Russia 24 were among the sources of stories that Reuters says ranged from lurid accounts of, quote, a U.S. politician covering up a human organ harvesting ring to the economic collapse of Scandinavian countries, end quote. There are a few things the Reuters story notes. First, contrary to YouTube's stated policies, the content was not labeled as state-sponsored. It is now. but that's after some media-on-media nudging. And second, the 26 channels drew about 9 billion views between January 2017 and December 2018, which is certainly a respectable number of views and a dispiriting suggestion of the worldwide appetite for this sort of thing. Finally, there was a commercial dimension to all those views. Omelas, the online research firm that sourced the Reuters story, estimates that the Moscow baloney may have pulled in as much as $58 million from ads, some of that from Western advertisers who are innocently trying to reach a news-downloading audience. What does that mean under standard YouTube ad revenue sharing rates? The Russians would have got between $7 million and $32 million, with between $6 million and $26 million going to YouTube itself. From the Russian point of view, that's probably just gravy on the side of an information operations main course, but still, it's enough to keep a couple of decent-sized front businesses up and running. A spokesperson for YouTube explained matters to Reuters as follows, quote, "We don't treat state-funded media channels differently than other channels when it comes to monetization, as long as they comply with all of our other policies. And we give users context for news-related content, including by labeling government-funded news sources." Quote. Reuters glosses this as saying that, quote, "YouTube said it welcomes governments in its revenue-sharing program and does not bar disinformation." End quote. We mention this not to bash YouTube, but to offer a kind of reality check concerning the state of content moderation. YouTube and other social media have been on a bit of an algorithmic high horse for the last couple of months about the content they would and would not tolerate and the measures they put in place to clean the Internet's cognitive house. Apparently, that high horse is shrinking a bit, down from deplatforming to a promise of compliance plus context. In fairness to social media, they've been getting a fair bit of stick from various governments, including the governments of relatively free states, about the stuff they allow to transit their platforms. And it's also true that content moderation is difficult, expensive, and quite possibly impossible to automate. There's been some backing and filling over Huawei blacklisting since late last week. It continued over the weekend. The GSM Association, a major mobile communications industry group, estimates that the cost of ejecting Huawei from 5G infrastructure could cost EU mobile carriers perhaps as much as 52 billion euros and might delay the fielding of 5G service by as much as 18 months. For their own part, U.S. tech companies, especially semiconductor manufacturers, have expressed concern over the ban's hit on exports. This is in some circles being pitched as a security matter, with the economic health of the export market being tied to the economic health of the defense industrial base. Some of those companies may have found sympathetic ears in both the Office of Management and Budget and the Commerce Department, who have suggested that it might be worth giving U.S. companies a bit more time to arrange coping mechanisms for the effects the entity listing of Huawei will have on them. The Department of Defense hasn't softened its own opinion of Huawei, nor has the U.S. let up on the diplomatic offensive against Huawei, urging South Korea to take a similar stock of the risk the Chinese device manufacturer may pose to supply chains. Russia has taken notice, too, and has publicly aligned itself with Huawei. This probably represents an opportunistic shot at the American main enemy than it does any deep convergence of Sino-Russian strategic objectives. China's government is warning tech companies, specifically Microsoft, Dell, and Huawei, of the consequences of cooperating with Washington as opposed to Beijing in the Huawei affair. Those consequences will be, Beijing points out, very bad for their business indeed. Not everyone got the memo. Facebook won't be offering its products pre-installed in new Huawei phones. And finally, Raytheon has agreed to be acquired by United Technologies. The merged company will be the world's second-largest defense and aerospace integrator, behind only Boeing. Raytheon will bring significant cybersecurity capabilities to its new corporate parent, assuming they're retained once the acquisition settles. Now a moment to tell you about our sponsor, ThreatConnect. Designed by analysts but built for the entire team, ThreatConnect's intelligence-driven security operations platform is the only solution available today with intelligence, automation, analytics, and workflows in a single platform. Every day, organizations worldwide use ThreatConnect as the center of their security operations to detect, respond, remediate, and automate. With all of your knowledge in one place, enhanced by intelligence, enriched with analytics, driven by workflows, you'll dramatically improve the effectiveness of every member of the team. Want to learn more? Check out their newest ebook, SOAR Platforms. Everything you need to know about security, orchestration, automation, and response. The book talks about intelligence-driven orchestration, decreasing time to response and remediation with SOAR, and ends with a checklist for a complete SOAR solution. Download it at threatconnect.com/cyberwire. That's threatconnect.com/cyberwire. And we thank ThreatConnect for sponsoring our show. And joining me once again is Joe Kerrigan. He's from the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute and also my co-host over on the Hacking Humans podcast. Joe, it's great to have you back.
It's good to be back, Dave.
Apple recently announced at their Worldwide Developers Conference that they were going to be introducing a single sign-on option.
Right.
They're calling it Sign-In with Apple.
Mm-hmm.
The folks over at Naked Security, Sophos' blog, have some coverage of that, which is what you and I are looking at here right now. Danny Bradbury wrote about. What do you make of this?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm not a big fan of single sign-ons, and the article talks a lot about Facebook and Google's single sign-on.
Right.
Now, I have absolutely no reason to trust Facebook on anything with their history and their mission statements, I guess.
Yeah, let me interject just quickly. I will shamefully admit that there was a time years ago, before I had seen the light with using a password manager, and before I think our opinions had turned on Facebook, before all the revelations that came out about what they were doing with their data, I made use of Facebook single sign-on for several sites because it solved a problem. It made things easier.
It does solve a problem and make things easier.
Yeah.
And the same with Google's. I'm more inclined to trust Google, although Google still does have the privacy or the privacy concerns because they are essentially a free service, which means you're the product.
Right.
And now Apple's getting into the game.
Mm-hmm.
My solution is I just use a password manager.
Yeah.
Right. And I have a different account for everything, and it's much more difficult, or they have to go through more math or whatever to align my accounts across multiple projects, right?
Right.
Or multiple websites. If I just willingly give up that information by having a single sign-on with either Google or Facebook, that's just been something that's never appealed to me.
Yeah.
I just don't want them to know who I am from that perspective.
Right. Now, the thing that Apple's doing here, though, is that they say they're coming at this from a privacy direction.
That's correct. Apple's addressing this from a privacy direction. And one of the things that they're doing is if your app in the App Store offers single sign-on for Facebook or Google, then you are required to offer the Apple option when it becomes available.
Little arm twisting there, perhaps?
Little arm twisting there. Yeah, this is nothing new for Apple. Apple's always been kind of dictatorial in their development process, which is one of the reasons I've not kind of liked them. But I understand why they do it. They do it because their users are the priority.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a genuine appreciation for that. And I like what Tim Cook is doing here, and I like the idea that if you're going to offer single sign-on, then you have to offer the Apple single sign-on, and then Apple's going to say, we're going to try to protect our customers' data. Now, you're still faced with the same underlying problem. You are trusting one entity with all your login information, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that this is a high probability event, but if Apple gets compromised, a lot of bad things can happen.
Yeah,
right.
It's interesting. They're allowing you to spin up randomly generated email addresses.
Yeah, they'll let you
disposable email addresses.
Disposable email addresses to sign up for these websites. They are definitely going at this with a privacy-focused message, which appeals to me a lot. If it weren't for all the other things I dislike about Apple, this kind of makes me want to go,
Can't help you out. I could see the turmoil within you,
right,
Joe.
Yes.
I wonder if this could really be disruptive. I mean, Apple has a lot of devices out there.
They do.
And by requiring folks to include this in their software...
If they don't require you to include it in your software, they only require it if you offer single sign-on from other vendors.
Right. I wonder if there's enough incentive, first of all, to get folks to switch over. If you're already using Facebook or Google, chances are that's a bigger thing for you to get someone to switch from something they're already using. It's a bigger effort, I guess. There's momentum there.
I think if Apple users see that it's available from Apple, they'll start using it because Apple users generally tend to love Apple.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I think there's the potential here for some disruption in a good direction.
Yeah.
But I think it also points to this focus on privacy. I think there's a recognition that people are hungry for this.
Yeah. And like I say with password managers, you run the same risk with the password manager, to be fair. If you use one of the ones you pay for or even the private one, those are all targeted by malware, and if those get compromised, they've got the keys to the kingdom.
Yeah.
So you're probably at the same risk that way for using Apple's single sign-on versus a password manager, but I just prefer using a password manager.
All right. Well, we'll keep an eye on it. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Joe Kerrigan, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Dave.
And that's the CyberWire. Thanks to all of our sponsors for making the CyberWire possible, especially our supporting sponsor, Observit, the leading insider threat management platform. Learn more at observit.com. Don't forget to check out the Grumpy Old Geeks podcast, where I contribute to a regular segment called Security Ha. I join Jason and Brian on their show for a lively discussion of the latest security news every week. You can find Grumpy Old Geeks where all the fine podcasts are listed. And check out the Recorded Future podcast, which I also host. The subject there is threat intelligence, and every week we talk to interesting people about timely cybersecurity topics. That's at recordedfuture.com/podcast. The CyberWire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technology. Our CyberWire editor is John Petrick, social media editor Jennifer Iben, technical editor Chris Russell. Our staff writer is Tim Nodar, executive editor Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening.